Have you ever noticed that no matter how much people say they love you, no one really seems to too far, that even surrounded by people, you carry a loneliness no one can reach. It's like being surrounded by voices, but none of them call your true name. This is the cruel truth about intimacy that you avoid looking at. No one can love who you really are, while you insist on hiding behind this mask. Carl Jung warned, but you still pretend you didn't hear. And I have to ask you, how long will you be content to be loved by a lie? Looking at you now, I see the same ritual I've experienced so many times. Waking up, brushing my teeth, choosing an outfit, and finally, that invisible mask. No one teaches us to do this consciously. We simply learn early on that it's not worth being rejected, that it's better to fit the mold than to defy the gaze of others. So we become an accepted version, only not real. Jung called this mask person, and it's a beautiful word because it comes from Latin, meaning actor's mask. The problem, according to him, isn't wearing a mask. It's forgetting that it's not your skin. You look in the mirror and believe that controlled, pleasant, charismatic, professional expression is you. But it's not. It's just the way you found to survive on this stage called society. And every time you put on the mask, person, a little piece of who you really are gets locked away behind it. Have you ever noticed how people transform depending on who's around them? How that playful friend becomes serious at work? How someone seemingly strong crumbles when no one's looking? It's just different masks for different stages. And if this seems normal to you, it's because you do it too. The tragic thing, as Jung pointed out, is that two people, they never truly love each other. They only interact. Two masks smiling at each other, while the souls behind them remain invisible, thirsting for a gaze that recognizes them. He said, "A persona is what someone is not, but what they themselves and others think they are." Think about it. All that love you think you received, was it for yourself, or for the mask you wore? The big trap is that the mask works. It brings praise, signed contracts, party invitations, smiling selfies. The problem is, none of this feeds your essence, only the role you play. So you come home after a busy day, full of interactions, full of friendships, and still empty. Because deep down you know, no one saw you. No one really saw you. And why do we keep going? Because it's scary to take off the mask. Jung said it serves a purpose to protect us from social chaos. Without it, we feel shame, vulnerability, and fear of rejection. But he also warned that when we confuse ourselves with it, we lose the chance to be whole. And that's why our friendships are often superficial. They're not between real people, but between personas. You fall in love with the version of the other person they want to show, while also showing off your most palatable version. And so we continue, dancing the dance of disguises. What hurts me most is knowing that most people will never know what it feels like to be truly seen and loved in their entirety. To have the courage to let their guard down, to be imperfect, and still find acceptance. Because this is only possible when we take off our masks, when we let out what lies beneath the shadow, the fears, the contradictions, but also the strength, the authenticity, the raw beauty of being human. So I need to tell you this today. No one will truly love you until you have the courage to show up completely. Because as long as you're hiding behind this persona, everything you receive isn't for you, it's for them. Carl Jung called this the spiritual void, and it's immense, but it can be filled. You just have to decide, who do you want to be when no one's watching? Maybe it's hard, maybe it hurts, but only when you risk taking off the mask do you discover who really stays and who deserves to stay. Now that you feel the weight of this mask, I need to tell you something even more uncomfortable, because it's not enough to just realize that you're hiding who you are. There's also everything you don't even want to admit you are. And herein lies the most painful part of intimacy. It's not just that others don't see you. You also don't want to see yourself whole. There's a side of you that you prefer to bury in the dark. Carl Jung called this side shadow. And until you have the courage to look at her, every relationship you have will be just a polite farce between two amputated halves. I know the word is scary. Shadow. It sounds like something evil, a monster locked away in some basement of your mind. But the truth is, the shadow isn't just bad. It's everything you've been forbidden to be in order to be accepted. It carries your repressed impulses, your stifled anger, your barely contained sadness, but also your wild strength, your ability to say no, your independence, your courage to be free. The shadow isn't an enemy, it's a mirror. But we learn from an early age not to look into that mirror. Have you ever noticed how you judge others? How that needy friend irritates you? How that person who yells disgusts you? How that colleague who demands too much attention makes you roll your eyes? Well, Jung showed us that what bothers you most about others is usually just your shadow projected onto them. You can't bear to see in others what you hide from yourself, and that's why relationships become so fragile. You don't love the person. You only negotiate with the part of them you can bear to see. When Jung studied the shadow, he wrote, "What we do not face within ourselves, we will encounter as destiny." It means that as long as you continue to deny who you are, your life will force you to face it from the outside. The people who appear to hurt you, to betray you, to challenge you, often only reveal what you refuse to see, and then you run away. You change friends, end relationships, move cities, but the shadow stays with you, always. And I know why we run away, because it hurts. Admitting that you're selfish too, that you've also manipulated, that you're also envious, lazy, and proud. It's humiliating, but it's human. And only when you embrace your own humanity can you embrace another's. Because, let's be honest, how can you love someone completely if you don't even love your own ugly parts? How can you accept another's shadow if you hate your own? You might be wondering why any of this matters. Why bother looking at what's buried? I'll tell you, because that's the only way to stop destroying your relationships. The shadow you deny today is the same one that sabotages your bonds tomorrow. It's anger that explodes without warning. It's neediness that demands too much. It's guilt that suffocates the other. It's jealousy disguised as care. It's pride camouflaged as distance. The ignored shadow turns love into war. And I don't want you to continue living relationships like this, always on the surface, always on the defensive, always wondering why it hurts so much. I want you to experience something deeper, a real friendship, a true love, an encounter that isn't between two masks, but between two whole beings, albeit imperfect. To achieve this, you'll need to make room for who you really are, including your shadow. And it could be now. You've already started when you've stayed this far with me in this conversation. Maybe because some part of you knows the time has come, that you can no longer pretend you're only light. So I invite you, stay in this dive. Don't hide. Continue with me on this journey of self-discovery. Subscribe so you don't miss any of this conversation we're having. Because with each video, we'll journey deeper together. And I promise, even in the dark, I will help you find your way back to yourself. Because your shadow doesn't have to be an enemy. It just needs to be heard. When you begin to face your own shadow, it feels like you're finally discovering who you are. But Jung warned us about something even deeper and more disturbing. Because not everything you believe to be yours really is. There are thoughts within you that aren't yours. There are fears, desires, and even values that you carry, that weren't born in your personal history, but that you inherited without realizing it. This is what he called collective unconscious. And until you acknowledge this invisible weight, you continue living within a script written thousands of years ago. A script you didn't choose. Look at your life right now. The things you value, the kind of person you think is right to love, the image you want others to have of you, that voice in your head that tells you what's normal, what's ugly, what's beautiful. Do you really believe this is you? Jung discovered that it isn't. We inherit a vast collection of collective psychological patterns. They shape us from within, as if they were instincts disguised as choices. And that's why we're much more predictable than we imagine. He called these patterns archetypes. They're like eternal images, appearing in every culture in the world. It doesn't matter if you were born in a village or a metropolis, in one century or another. At some deep level, you carry the same figures within you. The hero, the sage, the rebel, the martyr, the mother, the enemy. These characters aren't just in myths, movies, or books. They live within you, and they appear whenever you react without understanding why. Whenever you behave like everyone else does. Think about it. How many times have you truly chosen to be who you are? Or have you just gone with the flow? You chose friends because they fit the role you already expected. You pursued a career because it was right. You loved people who fulfilled what society taught you to desire. And you fought with those who dared to challenge those roles. This isn't your fault. It's just the collective unconscious working silently. Jung said something even more disturbing. In times of crisis or fear, these patterns become stronger. Have you ever noticed how groups of friends, entire families, or even entire societies behave the same way when they're afraid? It's as if everyone enters the same trance. Suddenly people are no longer individuals. They're a group reacting the same way, repeating the same words, the same certainties. The collective unconscious takes over, and that's why so many friendships fall apart when things get tough. Because you expected to find the human being on the other side, but instead found just another archetype being played out. You might think this only happens to other people, but no, at some point in your life, you've also played these roles without realizing it. Maybe you've been the savior, always helping, even when you didn't want to, or the eternal child, leaning on others to avoid growing up, or the rebel, saying no to everything just to feel special. None of these are you. They're just old patterns you've inherited, obeying without knowing it. And do you know why this matters? Because until you realize these archetypes are guiding you, you can't break free from them. You don't choose your friends. You choose roles that fit yours. You don't relate to a real person. You relate to the character they're portraying. And worst of all, you only offer your character to be loved, never the whole you. Jung said that individuation, the true process of becoming yourself, begins when you recognize that there are greater forces at work within you, that you are not just free will, that you are also history, humanity, instinct. But only when you bring this into consciousness can you finally decide who you want to be and who you no longer want to be. This explains so much about the friendships you've lost and the ones you insist on maintaining, even though you know they're empty. Often you're not attached to people. You're attached to the roles you play together. The eternal shoulder to cry on, who never gives up. The jokester, who hides their pain behind laughter. The responsible one, who always gets things done. The poor guy, who waits to be saved. You recognize these masks. You've worn some of them. And now perhaps, you are beginning to realize that none of them are really you. The collective unconscious is an inevitable inheritance, but it's not a mandatory destiny. It's the stage you were born into. But you can still choose which role to abandon, so that for the first time someone can see who you really are. Behind all the myths, behind all the characters. And even if you can see beyond inherited roles, there's something even more treacherous, more intimate, that corrupts your relationships without you even realizing it. Because it's not enough to remove the mask, nor to recognize the shadow or collective patterns. There's a mechanism within you that acts the moment your eyes meet someone else's projection. Jung called it one of the most dangerous forces of the unconscious, because it makes you believe you're seeing the other, when in fact you only see yourself reflected. How many times have you sworn someone was selfish, without admitting it was your own wound of rejection speaking? How many times have you been enchanted by someone who seemed perfect, only to discover later that you had created that perfection yourself, painting your own shortcomings onto their canvas? And how many times have you been angry with a friend, a partner, a family member, convinced they were hurting you, without realizing it was you who were pouring your own fears and traumas onto them? Jung said, everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. It's cruel, it's difficult, but it's also liberating, because every person who provokes you too much, who awakens hatred, envy, jealousy, or fascination in you, it's not just them, it's you projecting onto them. It's you denying within yourself what you don't want to face. That's why so many friendships fall apart, because instead of loving the other person as they are, You love the image you projected onto them, or you hate what they never were, but what you swore they were. And when they finally show you who they truly are, you feel betrayed. But it was your own expectations, fueled by your own projections, that betrayed you. Projection creates addictive relationships. You fall in love not with the person in front of you, but with what they awaken in you that's forgotten. You choose friends who carry, in their bodies, the shadow you don't want to embrace. You reject people who carry, in their voices, the echo of your traumas. And so, without realizing it, you're not experiencing genuine relationships. You're living a psychological game, where everyone is just a distorted mirror of what you hold inside. And the saddest part, projection isn't just negative. You also project light. You also project your strength, your creativity, your joy onto others when you can't access it within yourself. You admire that friend because she seems brave, but maybe you already have that courage yourself. You idolize that colleague who is spontaneous, but maybe it's your own spontaneity begging to be seen. Projections rob you of the chance to see yourself whole, and they rob others of the dignity of being seen as they are. Because while you cling to the image you projected, there's no room for the real human being that exists within imperfect, but true. Jung called this mystical participation, when two people become entangled in a cloud of illusions, unable to distinguish who they truly are. This is what explains so much frustration in friendships, love, and families. You expect the other person to fulfill the role you created for them, and when they fail to fulfill your fantasy, you feel hurt, rejected, and deceived. But in reality, you're only reaping what you sowed, a relationship based on what you needed, not what they were capable of offering. So how do you escape this labyrinth? There's no easy answer. Jung didn't promise a painless path, because realizing your own projections is a wound to the conscience. It's facing up to the fact that much of what you hated in others was actually you, that much of what you loved in others was also you. It's having the courage to admit that the most intense relationships in your life may never have been as genuine as you thought. So the next time someone deeply bothers you, breathe and ask yourself, what does this reveal about me? The next time someone deeply fascinates you, breathe and ask yourself, what am I seeing in them that already exists within me? This is the seed of a real relationship, a relationship between two people, not between two projections. And if all this makes sense to you, if any memories have surfaced while I was talking, then you're starting to see. And that's already a huge step, because only those who see can choose differently. If this touched you, don't forget to like it. Not just for me, but so this reflection can reach more people who, like you, are tired of losing themselves in their own mirrors. Because in the end, we're all trying. Only few have the courage to truly look. When you begin to realize how you project your shadow onto others, your shortcomings, your forgotten qualities, the something even deeper reveals itself. And perhaps this is the hardest part to admit. As much as you say you want to be loved, you're terrified of being seen in your entirety. And that's why, even amidst all these attempts to get closer to people, you hide. And that's why no one ever knows you completely. Jung called this fear of authentic encounter. Because to truly find someone, you first need to be willing to be your whole self before them. And that, for most of us, is unbearable. It's a fear that doesn't show up right away. It disguises itself. It disguises itself as I'm reserved. It disguises itself as I don't like bothering others with my problems, or even as false humility. I have nothing special to show. But the truth is different. What you fear most is stripping away your layers. It's exposing yourself raw, without the right words, without the rehearsed humor, without the calculated responses, because you learned early on that showing too much of yourself is dangerous, that when you're seen in your entirety, you can be rejected in your entirety. Maybe that's why you've gotten used to being only half of yourself, to showing only the acceptable parts, the parts others will applaud, and hiding the rest in a basement of silence, hoping no one will come down there to look. You've built relationships where everyone is comfortable with your mask, even you, But this comfort comes at a price, and that price is loneliness, because no one can love what you don't let show. Jung said, loneliness doesn't come from not having people around you, but from being unable to communicate the things that are important to you. And that's how you feel invisible, even when everyone seems to like you. Because they don't like you. They like the persona you present, and deep down, you know it. And that's why it hurts. But why is it so difficult? Because showing all of yourself means losing control. It means trusting that the other person won't destroy you when they discover your flaws. It means allowing yourself to be human, fallible, vulnerable. And that's the kind of courage few can muster. So we choose not to take risks. We maintain relationships in safe places, conversations that don't touch the wounds, compliments that don't skim the surface, complicity that doesn't become uncomfortable. Have you ever noticed how most friendships exist in this shallow realm? We laugh together, we go out for fun, we share success stories, but no one talks about that fear of not being enough. No one confesses to feeling envious sometimes. No one admits to having thought about giving up everything on a lonely night. Because no one wants to carry the burden of being seen like that. Because we've learned that being seen is dangerous. And herein lies the great tragedy. You can only be loved to the extent that you are known. And you can only be known to the extent that you show yourself. And that's precisely where you retreat. You hide your pain because you think it will push people away. But you don't realize that it's actually the opposite. It's in pain that the bridge to the other is built. It's when you show your wound that you open space for the other's wound to appear as well. It's in this naked, uncomfortable, and real encounter that intimacy is born. That's why so many relationships fail. Because you expected the other person to break through the layers alone, without invitation, without a sign. But no one can force the door you keep locked. And so we carry on afraid of being seen, and at the same time dying of thirst for someone who will finally see us. Have you ever stopped to think what it would be like if, just once, you showed everything? Not just your beautiful, confident, controlled self, but also the chaos, also the jealousy, the fear, the fragility, and realized that perhaps someone would stay anyway, that someone wouldn't run away when they saw your basement open. Jung believed this was possible, but not without pain, because those who expose themselves get hurt, but those who don't expose themselves destroy themselves slowly, in silence. That's why he said that the encounter between two people is like the contact between two chemical substances. If there is any reaction, both are transformed. But this reaction only happens when the ingredients are real, when there aren't just masks talking to masks. When you have the courage to show up whole, to be loved whole, because in the end being loved for your mask will never be enough, and you know it. When you finally begin to accept the truth that your fear of being seen in full is what's keeping you from building real intimacy, another, deeper feeling emerges, and it's even harder to face: rejection. The wound you've carried since long before you were even aware of it. Because no one learns to hide who they are without first feeling, at some point, that being whole wasn't safe. That someone looked at you, saw a part of who you were, and pulled away. This pain is etched in you like an invisible mark, and that's why you're so afraid to show it all again. This wound doesn't have a specific day to be born. For some, it begins in childhood. For others, in a failed romantic relationship, a betrayed friendship, a cruel word spoken at the wrong time. It doesn't matter. The result is always the same. You learn to hide to survive. And when someone gets too close, you retreat. Because every closeness carries with it the possibility of reliving that pain, that feeling that no matter how hard you try to be good, it will never be enough to be accepted whole. Jung said that no one can become conscious without first going through pain. And that's exactly what makes so many people give up halfway. Because this pain isn't small. It engulfs you. It makes you relive scenes you'd forgotten. The day you were ignored at school. Your parents' silence in the face of your crying. The contempt of someone you loved in the face of your attempt to be true. All of this comes back when you dare to show yourself. And each time it returns, you try to protect yourself by building another layer, another mask, another acceptable version of yourself. And yet none of these versions prevent loneliness, because you feel that even surrounded by people, no one truly stays. And worse, you fear that if someone does, it will only be because of the lie you told them, never because of you as a whole. That's why most relationships today are nothing more than well-choreographed performances. Everyone plays roles to avoid getting hurt, to avoid giving anyone the chance to touch that open scar. The wound of rejection also explains why you settle for mediocre relationships, for lukewarm friendships, shallow loves, because it's easier to accept little than to risk a lot and lose everything. You choose those who lack the depth to truly see you because it saves you the risk of being hurt again, and you call it security, but deep down you know it's not security. It's fear, and fear makes you cling to what little you have. Even when it no longer nourishes you, you forgive less, you trust less, you give up more, and so you survive each day in a theater where everyone pretends to be self-sufficient, when in reality everyone is terrified of each other. This wound doesn't go away just because you acknowledge it. It doesn't disappear just because you understand its origin, but it can be carried in other ways. Jung said that we are shaped by our wounds, but we don't have to be defined by them. You are greater than the pain that taught you to hide. You are greater than the fear that makes you choose less than you deserve. And that's why, when someone dares to look you in the eye and ask who you really are, you're startled, because no one has ever asked to see beyond your mask. And in that moment you realize how difficult it is to open the door to someone, but you also realize how unbearable it is to keep chasing it. The wound taught you to protect yourself, but it also made you forget what it's like to be embraced whole, with all the parts you've hidden. And maybe it's time to ask yourself, how long will you let the rejection of the past determine who you let into the present? How long will you live under the rule that being whole is dangerous? How long will you accept only the love your mask can receive, ignoring the love you as a whole deserve? Because no matter how much pain there is, it doesn't have to be your prison. You don't have to spend your life surrounded by superficial relationships just to avoid being hurt again. Yes, opening up again hurts. Yes, showing your scars can push people away. But it can also, for the first time, allow someone to see you for who you are. And maybe, just maybe, someone will finally choose to stay. Not because of the role you play, but because of everything you've tried to hide your entire life. Once you recognize that the wound of rejection shapes everything you build with others, you begin to notice something that's always been there, but that you've avoided facing: silence. Because deep down, it's the silence you fear most. Not the silence of being alone in an empty room, but the silence of realizing that, even surrounded, no one truly reaches you. Jung said that true loneliness doesn't come from not having people, but from not being able to share what matters with them. This silence, this absence of real connection, is what makes even the most wordy relationships so suffocating. You've felt this, haven't you? In that circle of friends where everyone laughed out loud and you forced to smile, feeling a hole inside. Or in that conversation where someone said, "I'm here for you," and you replied, "Thank you." But deep down you knew you weren't being heard. It's this internal silence, this lack of echo, that makes loneliness hurt even more. And to escape it, you fill yourself with noise. The noise of messages, social media, plans, meetings, just to avoid having to hear the sound of absence. But the truth is, no one escapes it forever. This silence catches up with you at the end of the day, when the mask is worn and you close the bedroom door. It arrives the moment you realize that no one really knows what you keep inside, that no one, no matter how close they are, has any idea how you truly feel when you let your guard down. This is the emptiness of relationships built on roles, not people. A void that all the laughter in the world can't fill. And why is it so hard to break this silence? Because it's not just made of unspoken words. It's made of fear. Fear of being judged, fear of being rejected, fear of being inadequate. So you only say what you think you should. You only show what you think is acceptable. and others do the same to you. No one takes the risk. No one crosses the line. It's easier to pretend everything's okay, that this silence doesn't exist. But it does. Jung believed that it is precisely in crossing this silence that true intimacy is born. Because for someone to finally hear you, you first need to speak, not with the voice you use to please, but with the voice that carries your truth, even if it trembles, even if it brings tears, because only then do you invite the other to do the same. Only then can you, for the first time, encounter each other beyond the masks. Silence is the hardest test for a friendship, for love, for any relationship. It reveals whether you truly have something to share, or are just taking up space. Many relationships don't survive when this silence is finally addressed, because most would rather continue distracting themselves with noise than face the lack of a true connection. And that's why so many people give up, because they lack the courage to say what needs to be said and hear what needs to be heard. But if you stop and think about it, silence is also an opportunity, a chance to finally invite someone in, to finally risk being honest, even if it hurts. Because there's nothing lonelier than being loved for what you're not, and nothing more liberating than one day hearing from the other side, "I see you. I'll stay, even with everything, even with what you tried to hide. So tell me, when was the last time you dared to break the silence? When was the last time you told someone what's really going on inside? When was the last time you asked someone what can't you tell anyone?" Maybe that's the question you need to ask yourself today. Maybe it's the one that will start building the bridge you've always wanted to cross. And I want to hear from you. What's the hardest silence to break in your life? What's something you've never had the courage to say? Comment below. Sometimes just writing is the first step. Sometimes just being read helps you realize you're not so alone. And as you realize the weight of this silence and the courage it takes to break it, another truth begins to reveal itself. Almost like a poison that has always been dissolved in every relationship you've ever had. The love you know is conditional. That's how you were taught to love, and that's how you learned to be loved. That's why you've always felt alone, even when someone said they loved you, because deep down this love always came with invisible clauses. A silent list of requirements you needed to meet to deserve to stay. You may not have realized it right away, but it was there from the beginning. In childhood, when you were told you were good because you behaved as expected. In adolescence, when you discovered that being accepted meant dressing, speaking, and thinking like others. In relationships, when you realized that every display of affection was proportional to your usefulness. How much you could please, how well you fit in. And without realizing it, you internalized this cruel logic: to be loved, I need to be less myself and more what the other person wants to see. Jung said, what we deny in ourselves ends up dominating us unconsciously. And conditioned love does exactly that to you. It makes you deny entire parts of your essence to fit into their mold. It teaches you that vulnerability is weakness, that anger is ugly, that sadness is uncomfortable, that flaws drive people away. So you mutilate yourself. You strip away your rough edges, hide your dark parts, silence your pain, all to avoid losing the little bit of acceptance they can give you. And it's not just you. Everyone has learned to love this way. That's why relationships always feel like a transaction. I give you this, you give me that. I pretend not to see your darkness. You pretend not to see mine. And so we go on, in a choreographed dance, where no one dares to be their true selves. Because everyone fears that the moment they reveal their true selves, the other will walk away. Conditional love also explains why you endure so much, why you accept crumbs, why you insist on maintaining relationships that only hurt you. Because deep down, you believe you don't deserve more. Because the wound of rejection you carry tells you that if you show your wholeness, you'll lose even the little you have. So you accept it, you settle, and call it maturity or patience. But deep down, it's just fear. The most tragic thing is that this kind of love never satisfies. Because it's never for you. It's for the mask you wear. You can surround yourself with people, collect affection, receive compliments. But all of this slips through your fingers when you realize no one knows what lies beneath. And this hurts more than loneliness. Because it's a loneliness, accompanied, silent, suffocating. Jung believed it takes courage to break this cycle. Courage to put your whole self into a relationship, even knowing it could cost you the relationship. Because the truth is simple, but hard to accept. Not everyone will be able to love you completely. Some people are only capable of loving your light, but shy away from your shadow. Others only know how to love as long as you fulfill their expectations. And almost no one is willing to love the whole imperfect, contradictory human being that you are. That's why you often prefer to keep quiet. You prefer to keep things on the surface. Because deep down, you're tired of feeling the pain of being seen and not accepted. But the question is, do you want to spend your life accepting this lukewarm love? Or do you want to risk losing everything to maybe, one day, find something real? The answer isn't easy. Because choosing wholeness is also choosing temporary solitude. It's accepting that many people will leave when you stop shrinking to fit in. It's facing the fact that some friends won't bear to see your tears. That some loves won't survive your silence. That some people will never be able to love someone who doesn't pretend to please. But it's also opening the door to something new, to true encounters, to relationships where you can breathe without fear of being to a love that, for the first time, isn't conditioned by anything. And maybe that's what you've always been searching for, even without knowing it. Because in the end, you don't want to be loved for your performance. You want to be loved for who you are, even when you stumble, even when you fail, even when you show that you're human. After understanding that the love you have accepted is conditional, an inevitable question arises within you. What if I stop bending over backwards to be loved? It's at this moment that a new, almost unbearable pain arises. The pain of realizing you've spent your life trying to be accepted by others, without ever learning to accept yourself. Because before any true intimacy with anyone, there's a much deeper bond you've ignored for so long, the bond with yourself. And until that exists, nothing, not even the most beautiful love in the world, will be enough to fill the void you carry. You may have felt this without knowing how to explain it. A constant restlessness, a discomfort when alone, a fear of the silence of your own company. It's because you still don't belong to yourself. You've spent so much time trying to be what others needed, that today you don't even know who you are. You carry a name, a story, a face, but you don't feel like you inhabit your own body. Everything you are seems borrowed, calculated, conditioned, as if your own life were a stage set for the applause of an invisible audience. Jung said that there is no awakening of consciousness without pain, because only when you begin to see these wounds do you realize how much you abandoned yourself to avoid being abandoned. You gradually forgot yourself, ignoring the small truths that wanted to emerge, silencing your desires to fit into the mold, repressing emotions to avoid disturbing others. And so you became a stranger to yourself. And the worst loneliness isn't the absence of others, it's the absence of yourself. It's waking up every day and not recognizing who you've become. It's looking in the mirror and seeing a character tired of playing, but lacking the courage to let go, because you believe that if you show who you really are, no one will stay. And maybe you're right, maybe some won't. But it's better to be alone with yourself than surrounded by people who only love the mask. This is the great price you pay when you don't belong. You may even be loved, but you never feel worthy of that love, because you know it's not for you. It's for the fabricated version you offer. So you live in fear. Fear that someone will discover the deception. Fear that someone will see what you hide. Fear that by showing yourself completely, you'll be rejected completely. And that's why so many people remain in shallow relationships, lukewarm friendships, and shallow loves. It's not because they're bad people. It's because they can't bear the risk of being seen for who they truly are. They no longer know what it means to belong to themselves. They've forgotten that the most urgent intimacy isn't with another person, it's with themselves. Jung wrote that no one can illuminate the outside world without first illuminating their own interior. This means that until you have the courage to delve into yourself, nothing external will satisfy you. Until you acknowledge your own shadows, you will continue projecting your fears onto others. Until you accept your own truth, you will continue seeking validation from others that will never come. Because only those who belong to themselves can truly belong to someone else. And this requires work, silent work, solitary work. It's not something someone can do for you. It's not something you find ready-made in another heart. It's an internal process, painful and beautiful at the same time. It's about stopping running from yourself. It's about sitting in the silence and listening to everything you've tried to silence. It's about embracing your light and your darkness without further judgment. It's about finally recognizing yourself in the mirror and saying, I see you. And only then, when you finally allow yourself to be whole for yourself, can you be whole for someone else. Only then will someone be able to approach you without bumping into your mask. Only then will intimacy cease to be a threat and become an encounter. Because you will no longer be afraid of being seen, no longer, because you will be whole within yourself. This is the greatest lesson of all. You won't find outside what you don't cultivate within. You won't be loved completely until you learn to love your whole self. Because no one can give you what you don't believe you deserve. No one can stay with you while you insist on abandoning yourself. When you understand this, you'll realize that it was always worth losing someone who couldn't stand your truth than losing yourself just to please. And on that day, finally, you'll discover what it means to belong, not to someone else, not to the world, but to yourself. And then, after all this, you begin to understand true intimacy isn't something found outside. It's something built within. It doesn't happen when someone chooses you. It's born when you finally choose yourself. When you stop running away from yourself. When you look in the mirror and for the first time, you're not ashamed of what you see. It's in that moment that everything changes. Because from then on, every relationship you have will be different. No longer based on the fear of loss, but sustained by the privilege of finding yourself. Jung said that we are all incomplete, but we can only be complete when we accept our imperfections. This means you don't have to be perfect to deserve love. You don't have to fix every flaw, erase every shadow, disguise every pain. You just need to have the courage to be whole, to show who you are, without guarantees, to say this is me, and let life decide who stays and who goes. The privilege of being whole isn't that everyone will accept you, because they won't. Some people will leave when they see who you really are, because the truth scares those who aren't yet ready to be true to themselves. But whoever stays, oh, whoever stays, will stay for you, not for the mask, not for the character, not for the performance. They'll stay because they chose to see you whole, and yet they decided to stay. And that's when you discover the beauty of true intimacy. It's not made of perfection. It's not made of easy relationships. It's made of imperfect encounters between souls who no longer need to pretend. It's made of silences that don't hurt, but welcome. Of glances that don't judge, but acknowledge. Of hands that don't hold to control, but to walk alongside. It's made of a love so rare, it doesn't require you to diminish yourself to fit in. This is the greatest transformation you can experience, leaving the theater of masks to enter the reality of encounters. Because the moment you accept yourself whole, you free others to be whole too. And you finally understand that you were never alone. You were just surrounded by people who didn't yet know how to be. So I want you to take a deep breath right now and repeat to yourself, I deserve to be whole. I deserve to be seen. I deserve to be loved for all that I am, including the parts no one ever wanted to see. Because these parts are mine. They are my story. They are my humanity. They are deep down my greatest beauty. And I want to thank you for sticking with me this far, because not everyone has the courage to hear truths like this. You're already a rare person just for getting this far, with an open heart. You're already walking towards something greater, something truer. Don't forget that. And if this journey touched you in any way, If you felt these words resonate deep within, I invite you to join me in this quest for greater awareness, for greater wholeness. Like this video, so it reaches more people who also need to hear it. Comment below what touched you most, or which phrase made you reflect most. And if you want to continue walking with me through these profound conversations, subscribe to the channel. Here we don't wear masks. Here we don't have to pretend. Thank you for allowing me to accompany you through this dark night of the soul. It is an immense privilege to share this with you, because in the end, we are all made of the same material: light and shadow, strength and fear, courage and fragility. And only those who recognize this can finally become whole. You deserve to be whole, and you deserve to be loved just as that.